Welcome, Latinos in Clinical Research. I'm Judy Galindo, one of the co-founders for Latinos in Clinical Research, and I'm here with Monica Cutiva. And today we're going to be speaking with Erica Polinat, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist, sub-I/writer for clinical research studies, and a current doctoral candidate. Eric, thank you for being here with us. We're excited to learn more about you, your education, your professional background, your experience, and what you're currently doing.
Well, thank you for having me.
So I guess we'll get started. Let's start from the beginning. How did you get, I guess let's start with your education. Where did you start? How did you start? I guess what area? Where did you go into for schooling?
Well, I started my career in Mexico. I started working in the neighboring city of Mexicali to Imperial County. We're located south of the border to Imperial County, which is east to San Diego County, I should say, in California, in the southwest corner of California. In Mexicali, you start your education with a bachelor's degree, your professional education with a bachelor's degree. And in the area of therapy or uh, human services or counseling, the bachelor's degree in Mexico is enough. So you graduate from your bachelor's degree, you do your community service hours, which are required in Mexico by law. And once you have your bachelor's degree or licenciatura title granted to you, then you can start practicing as a counselor, full-fledged counselor. Very different from the requirements in the United States that actually requires a graduate degree at the master's level for somebody to practice one of the areas of counseling or direct services, psychotherapy over there. So I started
Eric,
working. Yes.
Eric, sorry to interrupt. I have a question. How long does it take in Mexico to have like the psychology degree, like the bachelor's?
It depends on how you work your credits and what's the institution that is granting the degree. Usually, it should take 3 to 4 years, but a uh, precocious student could do it in 2 years.
Okay, and how about here?
In the United States, you mean the bachelor's or the full studies to become licensed and do therapy?
The bachelor's and then the rest.
Well,
Like,
in the United States, you would probably have to go first to college and do your prereqs, unless you start directly in your major area in the university. So the bachelor's degree should take you somewhere around 2 or 3 years, maybe four, depending on how you're moving with your credits. And then, depending on the institution that you are joining, you would have to do your test on subject areas, get a certain score to be eligible for the degree program, for the graduate degree program. And then you're thinking about 2 or 3 years, maybe four, to complete your master's as well. And in the area of psychotherapy or therapy, becoming licensed also requires that you fulfill a requirement of hours that are being supervised. In the case of a licensed marriage and family therapist like myself, you have to do 3,000 hours of supervised experience to be eligible to sit for your board examination. Once you pass your board examination, which is two parts, ethics and also knowledge, or the academic part, then you are granted your license. And then every 2 years in the period of renewal, you have to do at least 36 credit units of continuous education to be eligible to renew your license. So the requirements are very different
yeah.
from one country to the other. It's a whole different world, and also the way the practice is regulated, it's also very different.
Yeah, it's a very lengthy process in the US, right? To be a therapist, it just seems like it takes a long time.
I think there's
Yeah,
a significant amount of time that you have to invest. It's this effort to protect the consumer, the client, the patient, however we want to call it. There's an effort to protect because the infancy of our profession, and a lot of the people in this field doesn't necessarily know, the infancy of our profession is really mined and full of events where the relationship was exploited or misused. So the efforts to protect the consumer are very important, I believe.
No, I agree, and I think it's wonderful that it has such a lengthy process, because that way but I mean, the end product, which is a professional like you, have a lot of more experience, more knowledge, because if you think about it, mental health is such a sensitive and critical part of healthcare, because we don't have really tests that can prove that somebody has a specific condition, right? Like there is not a blood sample that you can just do and, oh, yeah, you have OCD, right? You have to get analyzed. And then if you don't have that all that knowledge and all that experience that you have right now, you might misdiagnose. And even though that you have that a lot of doctors and professionals such as yourself uh, can also make the mistake of misdiagnosing, right? I mean, probably it's not a mistake. It's just that it has such many paths, and every doctor is different, or every professional is different in the way that they analyze. Obviously, they follow their education and experience. But yeah, I think it's important to have it, and I think it's great that United States is more strict with that.
The system of, let's say, preparation of a mental health professional in the United States is very different than the one that you see in Mexico, for example, especially for people in my area, not so much for psychiatrists or nurses, which is a more similar process of preparation. The European system is more akin to the Mexican system in that regard. They have a similar approach to the credits and the kind of academic experience that a person has to have to become a therapist. Um, yeah, but there's a great advantage in having all these systems in place that protect the consumer. That is really important to have.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I guess going back to your education, but because you did start in Mexico and you were able to see, I guess in a sense, patients a lot sooner than you did
Yes.
here, you have that experience, right?
Yeah, one of the things is that it lets you start very early. If you are a precocious student, like I was saying, you can have your bachelor's degree by the time you're 20 and start seeing clients at that age. It's dangerous, like Monica was saying. It's a dangerous process, but also can give a person the opportunity to start gaining experience early on. In my case, I had a lot of luck because I was involved with local nonprofits in Mexicali that were giving services to people that were suffering domestic violence and other kinds of oppression and abuse. So that put me in contact with a clientele or a very specific part of the population that has this needs that require the professional to learn more, to do more, to advance his knowledge in the work that he does. So that was, to me, that was a very valuable experience. So that was a big part of what I did at the beginning of my career. This services to low income, high crime areas in Mexicali. And then I worked for the government in Mexico also. The first women's shelter in the area of Mexicali. There was a big revolution in Mexico where they started seeing domestic violence as a crime, which it took them way longer than how it happened in the United States. So when this revolution started happening, they opened up a women's shelter in the area of Mexicali, and I had the opportunity to work there as a counselor for several years as well, and that was also a very enriching experience for me, uh, being able to work with these families, with these women in shelter condition. So it's again something that requires from you as a professional, and it pushes you to learn and know more. Um, as you are already familiar with, I also did a uh, master's degree in Mexico through the Pedagogic University, the National Pedagogic University. It's a master's degree that is more inclined towards research, is epistemology and philosophy of science. So that's also something that I want to mention. I always had this inclination, this interest for research. So even back then, I was thinking, how can I organize my practice? How can I organize my day-to-day activities so that I learn something?
I can tell that you like studying.
Yes, yes. Eric is actually
That's
one of our
wonderful. That's
best
wonderful.
raters.
So yeah, the idea of being able to organize your practice in a way that it gives you information, that it makes you learn something, it's I believe the very basis of social research. Uh, and then due to a series of personal events, I decided to start working in the United States, and that's when I moved to start looking for a job in Imperial County. Validated my studies to one of the international education foundations that are available for uh, anybody that has an education outside from the United States. You submit your documentation and they tell you what's the equivalency in the United States educational system. And with that, I was able to join the master's degree program for the marriage and family counseling license. So that's the next educational process that I embarked on. I was working for local nonprofits at that time, and by the end of my master's degree and the time that I was doing my hours, I came to uh, be in touch with the people at Sun Valley and Sun Valley Research, and the clinical director, the Dr. NG, he helped me with some hours of direct client services. And Yuri was able to include me in some of the research that they were doing already. And I started there learning the very basics of this clinical research process that is in place. And it's been 6 years, I believe, that I've been collaborating with Yuri. And it's a wealth of projects that she brings into the agency uh, with these new treatments that are coming out to help people and mental health needs. So it's been quite a journey, you know, seeing all these different designs and all these different ways of measuring and keeping safety in mind. So it's been very formative and very interesting.
Eric, like for example, obviously you have all your knowledge, all your experience as a professional, and how research has enriched your professional part. Like for example, with your patients, with your personal, with your how you call your not the patients of research, but your how you say
the private practice patients,
your private practice. Yeah, how does research enrich that?
Well, one of the things that is really important is that you have a really good understanding of how the medication comes to be, you know, how it's created. It's no longer this magical event, you know, like you see the whole process. And there's a lot more confidence when you talk to a client about having them evaluated for medication needs. There's a lot more confidence in talking to them about side effects, for example. The other thing that gives you an advantage is that you are familiar with some of the newer treatments that are coming out. You know, that's also very encouraging for the clients because we can let them know, hey, this is coming up pretty soon, or hey, I'm gonna have you go to the research side instead of staying in the clinical side because we have a project right now, and this is something that I want you to do if you can do. It could be very beneficial. The other thing that it gives you is that it gives you this, um, I would say, this scientific mindset to what you're doing. You're no longer just thinking on this, um, let's say, automatic or ad hoc mindset of a counselor, but you're organizing your thoughts, you're organizing your ideas, so that kind of like there's a narrative that makes sense behind what you're doing and what you're seeing. And the last thing that I think it really gives is that you learn a lot of measurement tools, a lot of different additional measurement tools that you can use. Um, some of them free of use, some of them not, but you learn a lot of different ways to be more certain, like you were saying earlier, in the process of diagnosis and prognosis of a case specifically. So it really helps. I would say anybody working as a clinician could benefit greatly from knowing or participating in this clinical trial research.
What would you say, now that you say that, what would you say to a student that recently graduate and start practicing and they don't know nothing about research?
Well, I do, I do have the opportunity to talk to some people on a personal manner. You know, sometimes I my usually the advice that I give them is to don't stop being curious. You know, like don't assume that you have reached a point uh, where you know everything or you have all the answers. And the other thing is that um, you have to be a well-rounded professional in this area. You have to be a well-rounded service provider. And being a clinician only, without being an educator, for example, without being also part of research and scientific endeavors, it's not uh, a well-rounded professional. So if they want to be well-rounded professionals, I would tell them, you know, is get involved with research efforts. That's going to help you hone some of your um, skills, skill set.
That's great. Yeah.
That sounds great. Yeah, it's been very interesting. I mean, I would like to pick your brain a lot more.
And actually, let us. What are you doing now with your school? So you went back to school, right?
Oh, well, yeah. Recently, I went back to school for my doctorate in clinical psychology, and at this point, I'm at the candidacy part of the project, which means I finished the required credits, and I'm in the dissertation process at this point. And I'm also planning on joining certification program for a new type of intervention that is coming out, it's the psychedelic treatments. So that's the other academic project right now and in the works. So yeah, getting a doctorate and trying to get certified to do this new treatment also where we are at.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more psychedelics in research, which is very exciting,
Yeah.
especially obviously for mental health, because that will be a whole other experience and other possibilities of treatment for people out there that nothing that is currently in the market works.
Yes.
Yeah, and Eric was actually the one that brought it up to me probably a few years ago. I think Eric, remember that organization? You're like, hey, look into this. Is there something we can ever do?
Yeah,
And so I was like, I'm open to it. Hey, if we can bring a study and they need sites, let's try it.
Yeah, with MAPS, we're seeing more and more that whatever happened back in the 40s and the 50s, it was interrupted around the 60s and the 70s. It was really promising research, and some of the things that are coming out of the woodwork right now, especially with PTSD and MDMA treatment, is very promising because you have this portion of the population that we see that get no relief from interventions that are already out there. And that's why it's important that clinical trials continue to be promoted, uh, either by the FDA or by the private laboratories that produce the medication or by foundations. It's very important that we continue to have these ongoing clinical trials that are trying to find new interventions because there's people out there that still, even with all the things that we have available, don't find the relief that they deserve and the quality of life doesn't improve. So I think it speaks great, and also we have some catch up to do because Europe has been doing it since the 80s. So we need to catch up. We need to catch up in the knowledge and understanding of these new interventions. So hopefully we have more clinical trials coming up.
Yeah,
I agree.
research need to be up to date with mental health.
Yes, I agree.
We need a lot of more research.
Yes, and we'll keep doing it. We'll keep doing
Yes.
it.
All right. So I think in English, that's basically all, unless you have something else to add, Judy or Eric.
No, I don't. I think we got a good overview. Eric, did you want to add anything else?
No. So
Okay. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you,
Yeah,
Eric, for
thank
giving
you.
us your time. And that's it for today's video in English.
Yeah, thank you. Stay tuned
Okay.
for the Spanish one.
Yes.
All right.